Welcome back to another episode of Growth Stories, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Ben Landers. I'm your host. I'm the founder of Blue Corona. And in today's episode, I'm speaking with Dave Bryan. Dave's the president and CEO of Blackdog Builders. They're a design, build, remodeling company in Southern New Hampshire. Dave's startup story is awesome, and he's got lots of knowledge and wisdom to share. If you're trying to build a business, or if you're building a business and trying to scale it with excellence, this is an episode you don't want to miss. So go grab a cup of coffee and enjoy. Dave, welcome to the show. Maybe start with an introduction for the audience.
Great, Ben. Thank you very much. So my name is Dave Bryan. I am the president and CEO of Blackdog Builders, Inc. And Blackdog is a full-service design build company, but we're comprised of multiple profit centers. So we have a design build company in two locations, about 45 minutes apart. Then we also have a retail kitchen and bath showroom called Silver Lake. We have a handyman division, a division that does total basement finishing, or panelized basement finishing called Total Basement Finishing. And then our last location is a flooring store called Floor Me.
Nice. And where are you located? What's your service area?
Yeah, so we are in Southern New Hampshire, and so that's for us about 35 minutes north of Boston. Actually, both locations are plus or minus maybe 45 minutes north of Boston.
And how, how did you get into what was your path to business ownership, your kind of career, and what got you here?
Sure. So I went to the University of Vermont and got a degree in business. I went to the business school, which prepared me not at all to run my own company. And so when I graduated school, I kind of had assumed that I was going to put on a coat and tie and do the conventional 9 to 5 and get in with a Fortune 500 company or Fortune 100 company and start doing a training program or whatever. And ultimately, I ended up working for a consulting company in Boston. I spent 6 months doing it, and I was just miserable. I had spent all of my summers in college, a couple of my summers in high school, all my summers in college, swinging a hammer. So I was building houses on an island off the coast of Mass called Martha's Vineyard, and I just loved it. I just I loved the trade. I loved the craft. It felt good. It was rewarding. And what I was doing on the consulting side was just miserable. And so I had written out my goals. I'm kind of a dork about goal setting, and sort of always have, but even college I did. And I had said, if within a year after graduation, I'm not happy with the trajectory that I'm on in the corporate world, I'm going to start my own company, right? And I had absolutely no right whatsoever to start my own company. I had no clue at all about what I was doing. I was very enthusiastic. I was ready to go 100 miles an hour, but I didn't have a clue about what I was doing. So,
what got you into that sort of the goal setting? I know for me, it was sports. I was a cyclist when I was a kid, a swimmer, a runner, and those kind of sports that have an individual component. You have coaches and stuff, but it's sort of up to you to figure out, I want to run a marathon less than 3 hours or whatever it was, So what got you into the goal setting?
So great question. I think a lot of it initially was sort of this nebulous concept around success. I want to be successful, right? Probably in college when I thought that probably just distilled down to make a lot of money, right? I've subsequently, and probably you've subsequently, come to realize that that's not success, right? There's a lot more to define that word than your W-2, right? So, but then it was more about, all right, what do I need to do to get into a place where I can become, at that point in time, what my definition would have been successful, right? So it was spending time sort of writing out the things that I thought were important, writing out the things that I wanted to accomplish, and then eventually I became I'm 58. So you could probably, are you close to that to age, Ben? Something like that.
I'm 46. I just look old because I have the gray beard.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to apply you. And so back then, as I was looking for mentors to try to find, you could find sort of self-help type things that you would buy big booklets that were filled with cassettes. right?
Yeah.
And you could throw the cassettes in your
I had a
car.
Dale
There
Carnegie.
you go. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would start by buying all of those that I could get my hands on, and just started focusing on thinking about improvement, and thinking about what it takes to be better and consistently be better. And in the end, I'm very much a believer in what you focus on is what expands in your life, right?
Mm.
And then trying to find places where I can spend time with successful people and mentors who are willing to share.
It's amazing the similarities. Again, I've always been big on the goal setting. I went to Ohio University. I actually wanted to go to UVM, but I'm from Maryland, and my dad was an Air Force guy, government guy, looked at how much UVM costs. I like University of Boulder or Colorado Boulder and UVM for
There
the
you go.
outdoor stuff. And he
Yep.
looked at it, was like, these schools are really expensive. And the only reason you want to go there is to goof around outside. So anyway, so I ended up at OU, but kind of like you, I went to work for hotjobs.com. So I graduated during the .com boom.
Yep.
That was the cool thing to do. And then I went to WorldCom, which was in retrospect a pretty big mistake, but I didn't know that they were cooking the books.
Learning experience.
But yeah, and then it's funny that you mentioned kind of the wanting to make a lot of money. I was similar. And then it's funny, as our business grew, we used financial goals to, like we'd have financial targets and stuff that we wanted to hit. But for me, and I'm not sure I advertised this to the team very much, but it was more about, as the company would get bigger, my role and how I would spend my time would have to change. The types of people that I would have to talk to and interact with. You mentioned like meeting with other smart people. It's
Right.
like I'd have to find someone who, is running a $20 million, $30 million blue Corona, and say, like,
Right.
how do you deal with the ever growing complexities of this thing? So it made the job continually interesting.
Yeah.
Of course, I always felt like I was out over my skis, but
Well,
that's part of the fun.
but anybody who doesn't feel that way is just not telling the truth. They're just better at hiding it, right? If you unless you make a choice to never move outside your comfort zone, and if you make a choice to never do that, you've made a choice to stay where you are. Which is, I'm not judging that,
Yeah.
but if you're going to move and you're going to grow and you're going to stretch, you're going to be uncomfortable by definition. So,
Yeah.
real quick before we go further, just as an aside,
Yeah.
I got my degree in business. Uh, I also got an experiential MBA. That kind of refer to it because when I left the consulting company, I actually talked my direct manager, my boss, into leaving to come with me to start a construction company. And neither of us had a clue, right? And we spent about 18 months running a company. And at that point in time, we were wearing every hat. We were swinging a hammer. We were estimating. We were selling. We were doing the book, all that stuff, right? And I think the numbers are on about $220,000 of revenue that we did in that time frame. We lost $60,000, and my partner came to me to let me know that we were in big trouble. And we never even acquired workman's comp insurance at the time. And during that point in time, we had a guy break his leg, and it was a train wreck, right? And so I was very blessed because my partner was at that time he was a very good guy, but he kept the books and he wasn't really being totally upfront with me about what was going on, mostly because he didn't want to believe that we were failing, right? And so I didn't realize the situation. So when push came to shove and it had to come to light that we had this problem, he actually went and his folks took out a second mortgage in their home, paid 50 of our $60,000 off. And so and then we parted company, and I then assumed $100,000. I'm sorry, I assumed $10,000 in debt, which at that point in time, I was 24. That was a mountain of money.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Couldn't even conceive of it, right? And it was at that point in time that my wife and I said, okay, one of two things is going to happen. I'm going to go back to school and get a degree in law, or I'm going to try again, right? And I think I would have hated myself as a lawyer. I think I would have been miserable, right? So we chose not to go down the law road. But that year, which was 1989, was the year of the very first remodeler show that happened in Baltimore, right? And My wife and I put that on the credit card, which was already close to being maxed out. The only reason we could make any of this work was my wife actually had a good job and it paid our mortgage, right? It was, and so we went, and that weekend, we met people who were bright and articulate and intelligent and were willing to share their ideas and share their thoughts and were generous with their time. And actually, it transitioned or sort of transformed my view of what construction could be. Because for me, most of what I knew was other guys at the lumberyard, and
Mhm.
I'd look around and look for the nicest truck, and then want to try to sheepishly go up to that guy and say, "How do you do this? How do you do
Yeah.
that?" And it's an insane way to go. But all of a sudden, the world opened up, and we started meeting people who could help us, and
Yeah.
maybe meeting people who were treating their businesses with the respect they deserved, and then consequently getting the rewards they deserved as well.
Yeah. It's amazing. I don't know that this is a regret because I did quite a bit of it, but I didn't appreciate, especially when I was younger, I just didn't appreciate how much satisfaction people who are really successful get out of mentoring and sort of teaching, younger people. I didn't realize you could cold call, people that you would think would be way too busy to ever talk to you.
Right.
And it's sort of like, I mean, I don't know that they would have ever said it this way, but it sort of makes someone's day, when you have someone who's, as long as you're passionate and reasonably intelligent, sure, successful people don't want to, it's painful to give someone the same advice over and over again.
Right.
Um,
But
but yeah,
so I will tell you that has become a big part of my personal mission. Is the ability to help people, because it's hard to actually appreciate the meaningful impact you can have on someone's life. If you get them at the right place in their life and you say the right thing to make them change, you could put somebody on an entirely different trajectory, and you're not impacting them exclusively, their
mhm,
whole family. All of a sudden, so if you get somebody moving down the right path, let's say previously they weren't moving down the right path, right? And there was never enough money. And there was friction between the husband and the wife, and the kids hear that and sense that, and then there's conversations. Well, we can't afford to send the kids to college because we're not making it. And there's like the thing that helping someone become successful, their definition of successful, is such a game changer.
mhm.
And it just for me, it just fills me up. So I'm always, at any point in time, I usually have a few guys, and I don't mean to be sexist, people I should say,
Yeah, yeah,
specifically
yeah.
women, that I mentor, and we're actually in our marketplace. We're actually about to restart the Remodelers Council and
Mm.
start doing roundtable meetings with the Remodelers Council to help new people that are trying to figure it out do a better job figuring it out.
Yeah, and for anyone who's listening, that's again trying to build a business, eliminate any reluctance to reach out, to what even companies you might consider to be competitors, or you can go into an ancillary market where you're definitely not, competing. But people say all the time, I know you must be so busy, or I'm sure you're so busy. And I always think to myself, there was a time when we were building the company that I was, just 7 days a week, 24/7, couldn't afford to get sick. But these
Right.
days I sort of look at it and say, if I'm too busy, that's my own fault, having not prioritized, or I don't have the right team in place. I haven't delegated.
Exactly.
So I'm probably the
Exactly.
least busy. Again, I
Right.
probably shouldn't advertise this, but I try not to be the guy who's like, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy, because it just seems, you're
Right.
indiscriminate with what you say yes to.
Yeah, you want to be available. You want to be
Yeah.
accessible to your team, right?
Think about the business, think about the future, think about how you're going to evolve
Right.
things. So speaking of evolving, when you were giving the intro, you mentioned the business and how these different lines of business and profit centers have expanded. I guess sort of walk us through what it started as, and when you decided to then have that next thing, or that first new thing, whether it was the additional location or a
Yep.
different sort of
Yep.
business unit. What did you decide to do? What was driving it?
Sure. Great question. So we started the company out of our house, and again, I was wearing all the hats, and so that was swinging a hammer during the day, and project manager during the day, and estimating at night, and sales calls at night, and bookkeeping, and all that sort of stuff. Right. That was the way it was, and it was 80 hours a week, and foolishness, and I eventually hired my first part-time employee who is still with me today, and she's now our director of HR. And was wrestling over the single checkbook that we had and the one phone line and the one computer that we had to get work done. Um, and and we in about 3 years, we grew it out of our house. We opened our first showroom in Salem, New Hampshire. My wife left her company to actually come to work with us, and I had thought to myself, and we were probably doing, I don't know, 350 or $400,000 in
Mhm.
revenue. We started hiring a couple of people, and started growing a little bit. And as that was happening, I could do less, right? In terms of I couldn't always be swinging a hammer out there and so forth. And I thought to myself, when we opened the show, we wrote a business plan, like a huge business plan, because we needed to get financed, right? So
Mhm.
we shopped it around to 5 banks to get financing. And I think at the time we were looking for $150,000.
Mhm.
And we were lucky enough that one very new loan officer did not know what he was doing and granted us the loan. Four experienced loan officers said, "Hell no," but one said, "Okay, that's fine." That got us a start, and it was like for us, it was like cutting a deal here and negotiating there. I talked to our landlord. There was a big new building, there was a big old building, it was a big barn actually,
Ah.
on Main Street in the center of town. And he bought it, and it was just a shell. And I convinced him. I said, "Listen, we'll do all the renovation work at cost. You give me a 5 year lease at below market rate, and we'll get rolling." And that's exactly what we did. And when we opened that up, I thought to myself, if we can get if we can just do $1 million of business,
Mm.
and I can make 100 grand, I'm set for life. That's how much of a knucklehead I was, right? But and I thought, okay, we'll do that in 5 years, and in 2 years we did that. And then we started having, we started growing quickly. We started hiring more people.
Yeah.
We quickly outgrew that showroom. I built a new building for ourselves about a mile and a half away, that we built from the ground up.
Mm.
That we had multiple tenants in, so that as our company grew, we could eject the tenants over time
Yeah.
to occupy. Yeah, so and then over the course of time, we saw some other opportunities. There was a dealer, there was another cabinet dealer in another market, and they had been struggling meaningfully. Our sales rep said, "Hey, you might want to go talk to these guys." So
Mm.
we were able to buy a second showroom for $25,000, right?
Mm.
Fully set up. We could just kind of staff it and get rolling, and that created our second location opportunity.
Okay,
Uh,
I was wondering about that. Is it more showroom centric and you wanted just, a bigger footprint so people don't have to travel as far, or is that also kind of a home base where people go in the morning, stock the
yeah,
vehicle and then they go onto the job site. So it just, you don't want them driving, hour plus.
Yeah, so well, first we have a full production staff, we have a design, we have a sales staff, we have administrative staff, and we have those at both locations. In our
Mm.
primary location, we have the bulk of that, but in our satellite location, we still have designers and order processing folks and all that stuff. So, and we subsequently moved that. We actually subsequently 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we bought a much larger facility and created something we call the National Home Design Center, and it actually houses it's about 15,000 square feet, and it houses 5 different businesses. They're all home-related businesses.
Mm.
So
Mm.
we created a little synergy there, and there are multiple tenants that are tenants of ours because we own the building,
Nice.
and now we have our companies in there as well. So
Nice.
that's worked out really well. I'm really excited about that.
How did you decide again to expand into the different, like you mentioned, the basement paneling and
Yeah,
some of the
yeah,
other businesses? At what point did you sort of launch those? And again, what was the thinking behind it?
sure. So I think somewhere around 2014, 2013, something like that, we got exposed to a company called Dr. Energy Saver. And Dr.
Mm.
Energy Saver is a dealership out of a company in Connecticut called Contractor Nation, and they have multiple dealerships of home-related businesses. So either waterproofing or basement finishing or trash removal or all kinds of things like that, right? And my brother was looking for an opportunity to take on a business, and so we went in. I let him sort of set it up out of our office and
Mm.
get going with that. And it turned out that he had always spent his life in the corporate world, and the small business world ended up not being a good fit for him. And so we took over and started running that business, and uh, and that business got us exposure to one of the other companies called Total Basement Finishing, because the dealer in our area went out of business. We took over that dealership, and in reality, Total Basement Finishing was just a better fit for us than the
Mm.
energy world, so the energy business. So we let the energy business go, and then
Mm.
we grew up the Total Basement Finishing dealer, and we've been the number 3 dealer in the country for a while for them, and it's a great business. all of the materials that we use are all inorganic, and many of them are sort of are patented, so used for dealer only. So we create a mold and mildew free space that we could do in a short period of time for a great price, and it's been a great business for us.
A couple of times you've hinted on, like going to school and getting the business degree. I had a business degree and an organizational communications degree for no good reason. And I think the organizational communication degree has actually been more helpful in a way than anything I learned, in the College of Business. But and then you also just mentioned, kind of for some people who've come from a big company, they find that the small company is just, it's not the greatest fit. What were the aspects? I mean, have you ever been able to put your finger on why it's so different running a small business, versus what you learn, when you get a business degree? I have my own opinion there, but I'm just curious what your
Yes,
thoughts
that's a
are.
great question. So I guess for me, the big difference, and in thinking back when I was in school, so back when I was in school, there were no classes on entrepreneurship,
Mm,
right, or small business. Everything was the case studies were on IBM or Procter and Gamble or whatever, right? And so much of it was, to me, theoretical, but intangible, right?
mm,
And where small business is really so boots on the ground, figure it out, be practical, be smart, be nimble. And so, that's if you're not if you're not being taught those kinds of things, you then just got to figure it out, right?
mm,
Um, so I think a lot of it also is mindset. Small business is not for the faint of heart, right?
mm.
You have to have a certain level of comfort in dealing with chaos in the beginning, maybe, and resiliency, right? How many times do you get kicked in the teeth before you say, "Okay, I'm done," right?
Yeah.
And and for me, the answer was there wasn't a number, right? I wasn't going to, because I certainly experienced a whole bunch of pain and discomfort and problems and stress and all that. But if you can keep your head in the right place during it, you can be the leader your organization needs to be.
Yeah.
And that's in the end, that's the deal, right? It's the transitioning from doer to leader that is
Yeah.
probably the biggest journey, the hardest journey, right? Because for a long time we get a lot of value out of doing, right?
Yeah.
And being
Yeah.
super productive. Like I'm the
Feels
best.
great when everyone's coming to you, and you have all the answers. And then you quickly realize, like, unless you want to just live in the office and never sleep and never take a break or a vacation,
Right.
it's not going to
Right.
go so
Yeah.
well.
So I was away this summer for 7 weeks. Didn't step back in the office for 7 weeks, right? And there was not was not a crisis calling me and saying, "What do we do?" Our team are good folks who care, who buy into our values, who believe in what we do, who understand, at the core what the right way is to think,
Mm,
and that allows me not to be the center of the universe.
mm. Well, I'll say, one thing, when you were talking about the case studies in school, all I could think about was all of our cases, we did a case study on Xerox, and this
Right.
was, when Xerox's business was being disrupted and they were trying to get into like services model. I think IBM was another one, same
Yep.
sort of thing, like the Lou Gerstner. And yeah, I mean, again, it's like it's helpful, and there's certain like business strategy elements that that I think you can draw from it. But I remember a case study, and it wasn't about Joseph A. Banks, the discount
Yeah. Yeah.
closer, but it was a similar situation. It was sort of like, hey, you have this this small retail shop, and and do you discount or do you not? And people were like, oh, well, if you discount, it's going to become Joseph A. Banks, where everyone knows, you only buy when it's like buy one, get five for free or whatever.
Right. Right.
And someone else in the class who had worked for their parents' small business was like, it's ridiculous. Small business wishes that by running one promotion, right, like replace your furnace before the winter,
Right.
for a discount because we're slow. And then the thinking that like every fall, then we're going to get, pillaged by these
Right.
discounts. It's like you wish that your advertising created that sort of like, everyone knows you as the discounter. And so it was sort of like this practical, like this person was like, that's insane. Like
Right.
my dad has a truck that sits out front of the gas station, and we rent it, for $100 a day. But when it's just sitting there not being rented, if someone walks in and says, I'll give you $50 for it, he'll take it because it goes straight to the bottom line. Truck's already paid off, business is profitable, marginal. Like, what are the odds another person was going to come in right afterwards and say, hey, where's that truck for $100 a day? He's like, we wish that was our problem. So yeah, that's interesting. And there was one other thing I was going to say, which is being able to step away from the business. So clearly you have, some people call it an operating system, or you have enough structure in the business and the right team in place. Do you use sort of a system to run the business? And if so, is it like EOS or something like that, or just something that you've kind of created on your own?
So we are actually a year ago, we implemented 4DX. Are you familiar with that? Four
No,
disciplines.
no.
Okay, so it's from Franklin Covey. It's called Four Disciplines of Execution. It's a lot
Oh,
like
okay, yeah. I think I might have read the book, or
yeah. And it's good. It's good stuff. So but the foundationally, that's a tool that we use for process improvement more than it is for operation, right? For day-to-day operation. For day-to-day operation, I think that the big deal is that everything we do is a system or process, right? We don't link anything, right? There's a rhythm to how everything runs, and so no team member is ever in a place where when something happens, they're wondering, oh, what do I do now? Right? We sell a project. There's a series of triggers that trips that you do the following things, and then when we produce a project, there's a series of triggers that trips. We do the following things, right? So, and then we have weekly meetings to confirm progress and confirm accountability, and those are also very structured, very systematized, very process driven. So I don't. When we transition in the remodeling world, in the construction business, one of the biggest hurdles to get away from is when the owner stops selling. Right? We don't have a client. When the owner doesn't have to have a client-facing responsibility, that's a game-changing time, right? But in order for that to happen, you got to be able to give the client the same experience as if you were the owner, right? And so the only way you make that happen is through process and through sort of predictable structure to allow your employees to do the same thing that you would do, and to understand the fact that when they drop the ball and they don't do the same thing, that's not failing, that's tuition, right? Failing is when they do it 2 times in a row, right? Tuition is when they screw up one time and you say, okay, what'd you learn? And let's not have that happen again, right? So that's a lot about it.
I remember my original business partner, we were like, I think we were running AdWords campaigns or Google ads, but it was AdWords at the time, to grow Blue Corona. And, I had like $1,500, monthly budget. And I had a business partner who did not work for the company, ran another company. So he was like a mentor. And he sort of just joked around and he said, why don't you spend $20,000 on it for 1 month? And then you'll know definitively. And I said, $20,000, that's a ton of money. And he's like, yeah, but it's going to be 18 months at $1,500. And you're still not going to have, clue what's going on, because it's going to be, the data is going to come in so, sort of trickly. And I remember he made some comment, like he has an MBA, and he went to Harvard. And so, he's like, you always talk about how you wanted to go back and get an MBA. He's like, an MBA costs like 150 grand, not counting all the, the opportunity, lost income and all that. He's like, what do you think it is when you spend 20 grand? And if it doesn't work, you've got like a divider and a binder of all the shit you've tried that is a complete waste of money. And he's like, that's all the MBA, is, and I thought, oh, I didn't think think about it that way.
And circling back, like school in general, from my perspective, is if you did well in school, like I don't remember most of what I was taught, right? And in fact, the 2 finance classes, or the accounting classes I took, I did really poorly in. And it wasn't until it became my money that I was like, okay, now I got to really figure it out. And then I became very conscious and very proficient at the accounting side of our business. But and I don't know maybe that was lack of maturity or whatever. But in the end, for me, if school taught me how to learn, like I learned how to learn, and if it taught me some of the softer skills about how to work with people, that only some of the soft skills, right? I fumbled through a lot of them. Then that's value for me.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Did the the recognition, it always sounds probably to people kind of like common sense that, you need to define things and have a process and standard operating procedures and sort of go through that. But when you're starting a company, the common refrain is I'm too busy to write down all my
Sure.
process and stuff like that. But did you sort of come to that conclusion or moving in that direction through like going to the remodeler show and talking with other sort of more sophisticated folks? And was it sort of iterative, like you had a weekly meeting and some things work, some things don't, you just keep tweaking it? Or are you one of those folks that just is very, sort of like you're just wired that way and it comes natural for you?
So it's probably a combination of a few different things. So I certainly got exposure through attending trade events. I became sort of ravenous for knowledge, right?
Mm.
So specific to our industry.
Mm.
I joined a program called Remodeler's Advantage. Remodeler's
Yeah.
Advantage is
Yeah. I know Victoria.
Yep. Okay, great. So I actually work for Victoria. I facilitate roundtable meetings for her.
Nice.
But I've been doing that for 20 years. Before I did that, I was a member and joined and did that for many, many years. And just like in most businesses, unless you're on the cutting edge of some technology,
Mm.
the way to run companies is no mystery, right? And so if you see other successful smart remodeling companies, they're doing something somewhere, we just steal it. We're
Yeah.
like, okay, that's
Yeah.
cool. And then they would steal something we did.
Yeah.
Great, right?
Yeah.
So much of what we do is just exposure to other brighter people. And we only need to be bright enough to see that they're bright. We don't have to be that bright to do it ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I'm being a little self-deprecating, but at the end, that's where we got a ton of it is exposure and saying, okay, I really like the way they do that. Let's put a variation of that into our company.
Well, it's funny because I feel like, again, I feel like I've been overly hard on the educational system, and I don't mean to be. I got, like you, I got a lot of value out of, going to school and that kind of thing. Dad, if you're listening to this, your money was well spent. Even though I'm ragging on a little bit, but in school, it's like, you're taught over and over again not to plagiarize. And if team A in your, class is doing this, you need to pick a different topic or do it a different way. And then I remember, again, when I met my business partner, I just assumed he went to Duke, was an engineer, went to Harvard. I figured, this guy has got to be one of the smartest, folks out there. And he is incredibly bright. But I remember when we were, I was working for him and we were kind of brainstorming business ideas. And he would always say, like, why don't you spend this weekend and find like 20 companies that do that? And look at their websites, look at LinkedIn, who are they hiring, who's running it, what are their skill sets, how do they price it, who are their customers? And I remember thinking like, well, don't we need to do something unique? And he was like, are you kidding me? Like, no. And when you try to do what someone else is doing, I've always found that it's almost like a band playing a cover song. You're playing the same notes and you're trying to replicate the way that your heroes sound, but what ends up coming out is as much you. And then once you do it enough, you start coming up with your own songs, and then you say we were inspired by in your album cover.
Yeah, there you go.
Like people we ripped off.
I hear some of our employees will say, okay, we're going to Blackdogify it, right? So we'll talk about an idea, but the idea doesn't quite fit our culture, so we're going to and that's a great term. We're going to Blackdogify it, right? And I think that makes a lot of sense. And keep in mind, the other side of this is, in our world, in the construction world, we're not splitting the atom. This is just home improvement, right?
Yeah.
You sell a job and you put it in the ground and you go do you go do it again. It's just not that hard. And we make it hard by sometimes overthinking it or planning on it, right? Along that process, you got to make the client feel cared for and make them feel like they got more than they paid for. But who doesn't want to do that? The guy that I bought pizza from wants me to feel like I got more than I paid for, right? It's not hard. In theory, yeah, in theory.
It's amazing how the basics are so similar between your industry, between our industry, and as you mentioned, like even running a business. I'm 100% positive you could come in, knowing whatever you know about digital marketing today, and do a better than average job, at running a Blue Corona, because so many things are the same. I mean, whether you're building a website or installing a kitchen, the only difference is we don't have to be handy with hammers. I can barely turn a light bulb.
Well, so it's funny you say that because I think one of the big things that most people don't think about, you guys are a service business, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there it is not about the product, right? And most people think the construction business is about the product. It's the roof you put on, or it's the kitchen you built, or it's the bathroom you renovated. It is not that,
Mm,
right? While we do deliver a product in the end,
mm,
it is about the experience we give the clients, right? And real quick story on that, because we are an experience business, they get a product, but if we don't deliver a great experience,
mm,
but we deliver a great product, we're going to go out of business because they're not going to talk to anybody else about us, right?
mhm,
I had a client call one time and say, I'm sitting in my beautiful kitchen. We talked to you guys about a project. You told us it was $70,000. I thought that was, I'm sorry, you told us it was $100,000,
mm.
and I thought that was crazy. And so we hired a guy for 70. Um, and he said the kitchen's beautiful. And so now I'm actually annoyed that he called. I was like, so what the hell are you calling me for, right? And he said, so here's what happened. I hired this guy for 70. And I'm now sitting in a beautiful kitchen looking at all this work he did, and it's wonderful. And instead of enjoying my coffee, I'm angry. And I'm angry every time I sit in here because I remember the arguments that I had. Because in the end, it cost me $100,000. And I had to argue over every change order that got me $30,000 added onto the project, right?
Mm.
So what's the difference, right? Clearly that company had the skill to deliver a nice project, right? That's not that hard. Delivering the sawdust and the tight joints and the smooth finish in the walls. That's actually the easy part. Doing that stuff and making a client feel like you had their back the whole time, and being vigilant enough on the upfront part of your business that you're not sloppy with your contract and you're not sloppy in your specs, and you do the things that you know you need to do because your client doesn't know that they need those things. You do, right? And you deliver a complete project. That's the difference, right? It's not
I
hard.
always thought that that's got to be the hardest, the hardest part of your business. And again, in a way, it's similar. Excuse me, it's similar to ours. A lot of our clients don't understand anything.
Right.
What we're doing is like magic, and it doesn't help that it's in the cloud, and we're not building a bathroom where someone can feel and touch and
It's very
that kind of
amorphous.
thing. But
Yeah.
I've always thought that the hardest part about your business has got to be managing the homeowners. I mean, I've watched. We did a small flooring project, and like even my wife and I were arguing over. I wanted the stair, the seams in the stairs caulked, with just a perfect. And she's like, what, we don't need that. I don't even want that. And we're going back and forth. And the guy who's installing this is looking at us like, oh my God, you two.
Right.
It's like a marriage counselor. I can't imagine, going through a kitchen, a full kitchen renovation or something major. And so I got to imagine that you've got a ninja tool set for managing
Well,
homeowner expectations. And
yeah, and that's a big piece of it, right? So some of it's just training, so our team knows what to do and how to do it, and some of it is my apologies.
no
Uh,
worries.
some of it's managing, uh, consumer expectations and trying to control that process, and some of it's just helping your team know the right way to manage, handle the situation. But we actually, when a client buys a project from us, we give them a thick client binder, and it's like we call it the owner's manual to working with us.
Mm.
So to the extent they understand that stuff better, it just goes smoother, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, David, I've one final thing, and then also want to hear sort of what you're focused on now and going to be focused on next year. But you guys have done something that I think is extremely forward thinking with respect to launching your own podcast. What prompted that, and how has that helped, or how's that gone?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, it's interesting. We did it in a not much intention of serving ourselves. It goes back to sort of that part of what has become a bigger piece of my personal mission, which is helping others.
Mm,
So the focus of our podcast, which is called Renovation Made Right, the focus of that podcast is all about helping homeowners
mm,
have a positive experience. Right now, obviously, we have a pretty good listenership, actually, surprisingly, and the podcast has been going really well. But only a fraction of people that listen to it are in our market, and that's
yeah.
exactly what we expected. I did not, the beauty and challenge associated with podcasts are, you only can have so much local influence, right?
Yeah.
You can, right? And so, we get feedback from people who are kicking off a remodeling project,
Mm,
and because of some of the stuff we shared with them,
Mm.
they just have a better experience, right? Because unfortunately, there's tons of contractors in the marketplace who are not sophisticated, who don't really understand what to do, but they're good contractors, they're good carpenters, or they're good
Mhm.
builders, whatever. So we try to give people the tools to have a good outcome regardless. And it's been a lot of fun. My wife and I do it together. My wife is a CKD and CBD, certified
Mm.
kitchen and bath designer. And she's not active in the business day to day because we have 4 kids and her job is to keep them out of jail, right? But so far, she's successful. Um, and but she's super bright, and she spends a fair amount of time on our podcast making fun of me, which I suppose everyone seems to like a lot. So that works out just fine.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I always think with things like that, when you're trying to give to other people, you end up getting quite a lot yourself, either learning or whatever it might be. So I figured that was the
100%.
case, but
Yeah, 100%. And it's been fun, and we continue to do it. We continue to get some traction, and we even had somebody call up and offer to sponsor us, which was kind of fun.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what are you working on for the remainder of the year, and what's your focus for what do you see in 2023?
So we got a couple of exciting things happening. We just started planning for 2023, and we're still having sort of a wrestling match with our leadership team
Hmm.
about what the year is going to look like and what our goals are there. But we're still early enough at the stage to
Hmm.
be able to have those kind of back and forth. And then the other thing that we're excited about is, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit this because you're a technology company, but we've been operating with the same software system that is probably 16 years old. And the company is essentially out of business now. It still runs, right?
Yeah.
We still renew it every year, but we're switching to a cloud-based estimating and project management software, which is sort of a big, high horsepower machine software. And I actually signed up for it on Friday
Nice.
after probably 5 months of really diligent research about what program to go with. So we're very excited about that. At the same time, we have some trepidation, right? It's going to be painful to make
Yeah.
a changeover, but it's going to give our team such better information and such better so many better tools to manage projects, and then even just for our consumers to be able to have uh, a cloud-based portal that they can log into to
Yeah.
get the information on their project. They can make payments and all like silly stuff that we
Yeah.
should already be doing. That is going to be a big game changer for us.
Put this in your tickler file. Mike Wilson, our president, and Dinesh Damija, who's basically our chief technology officer, both came from the ERP world, from Infor. Infor's
Okay.
like, Oracle, huge company. And it's unlikely that either one of them has, technical familiarity with the system that you've gone with. But what I would say about those two is the mindset, having helped so many companies go from Siebel to Infor, Oracle to
Yep.
Infor, Microsoft Dynamics to Infor. Dinesh in particular would be a good person for you to just connect with at some point, because what we're doing on our side is dealing in kind of connected data.
Yep.
And so we can tie into, say, Service Titan in the HVAC plumbing world. We can tie into fill in the blank, Route Man, all these
Sure.
other
Sure.
systems. And there's probably no question, if you're going with the cloud-based system, that there's probably an API that we could connect to feed our data in, where it would be helpful for the customer service rep or for the sales rep to know, the source of the lead and all that kind of stuff. So
That sounds cool.
put it in your future file.
Appreciate it.
Not to add to your plate.
All right, Ben, it's been a
Dave,
pleasure.
this was awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. You've shared, I think, a ton of tips and advice that other folks trying to build their business can learn from. And again, we all really appreciate you as a customer of Blue Corona and just taking the time to do this. So thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Be well.